Thank you all for being here and joining us for our meeting of the Title I Committee of Practitioners. I'm Tara Rodriguez. I'm very glad to be with you all this morning. We will go ahead and get started with the roll call. Jan Anger, Mary Beth Bowling, Ashley Burnett, Christina Dalton, Ricky Hanger,
Here, present.
Stephanie Harris,
Present.
Diane Hatfield, Holly Kimball, David Malonte,
I'm here.
Robert Cheryl Tanner, and Daryl Vincent. And I believe a couple of people may have just joined. Can someone let me know if you just joined?
Yeah. Jan Anger, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
Christina Anger. Dalton, Davis County Schools.
Awesome, thank you. Is there anybody else that I may, it sounds like we may have one more.
Daryl Vincent is coming in.
Okay, awesome. Mr. Vincent, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Thank you for being here. Did I miss anybody else on the roll call? All right, now today we have we've had some little switches and changes this morning. It seems like there's always something going on, but we have Leslie Bridges. She's one of our administrative assistants, and she's going to be advancing the slides for us. So just a slight change there. So let's go on to the next slide and take a look at our agenda for this morning. All right, we've got first, we're going to have a Title I Part A update that will be from Erin Sedeth. She's our branch manager here in our Division of School and Program Improvement. Then we will hear from Bobby May. She's our newest migrant program consultant, although she's been working with the migrant program for a long time. She will give us a migrant update. Then we will have Sharma Aiken. She is our state foster care point of contact here in the division, and she will give us a foster care transportation presentation. And then last, we will hear from Shara Savage. She is an Education Administration Program Manager in the Division of Assessment and Accountability Support, and she will give us an assessment and accountability update on the 2025 test administration and Kentucky United We Learn framework. And then last, we will talk just a little bit about future agenda topics that you might want to hear about, and our last meeting of the year, which will be in April. And then we'll adjourn. And I want to again, thank you all for being here. Of course, this committee is required in statute, and its purpose is to give the Kentucky Department of Education feedback on its administration of the Title I program and our policies and procedures and so on. So we're really looking forward to hearing from you and having some great discussion this morning. So Leslie, do you mind to advance us to our next slide? And we will have next our Title I Part A update from Erin Sedeth.
Good morning, everyone. As Tara said, I'm Erin Sedeth, and I'm the branch manager for the Title I Part A Support and Improvement branch here. Let's go ahead to the next slide. All right. So first thing I want to do is give you guys an update about the Kentucky Paraeducator Assessment, or KPA, revision process. So I shared during the April and October of 2024 meetings when I joined you all, I shared that KDE has contracted with Evaluation Systems of Pearson to revise the KPA, and we have made a lot of progress since I last shared some information with the committee in October. So let's take a look at this information. First up, Pearson has finished the draft of the framework. They finished that up in December, and having input from current paraeducators in Kentucky during this process was something that is very important to us. We knew that when we first started. So I created an interest survey and asked district coordinators to share it with Title I paraeducators just to gauge their interest in providing feedback on the framework and or helping to field test the revised KPA once it's ready and any supporting resources. So the questions on that survey were designed to ensure that participants selected would represent the diversity across our state, different regions of the state, rural, suburban, urban, years of experience, grade levels that they have experience working with special education, as well as the method that they received the additional qualification requirements, whether that was having an associate's degree or higher, completed 2 years of college, or they took the current KPA. And we received 155 responses from paraeducators working in Title I schools that were interested in participating. So that was an amazing response that we got. So this month, Pearson is working with 2 small groups of some of those paraeducators. We have one group of elementary level paras and one group of secondary, and that's to obtain feedback on the framework. So they met with the elementary group last week, and the secondary group had to be postponed till this Friday, but they're meeting this week. And David and I met with them yesterday, and they shared some preliminary feedback. It was all very positive. The paras think that the items on the framework really are a good representation of what they need to know for their jobs. So next, they are going to finalize any associated edits to that framework based on that feedback and share that with us. And they're also in the process of writing the revised assessment itself and all of the supporting resources. Once the revised KPA is ready, we'll select individuals to participate in some focus group sessions and field testing, some of those paraeducators. And the focus group sessions, our plan is to have those occur in late April. And then after that, Pearson will finalize the test and the resources, and we plan to have all of that available by June 30th of 2025. Does anyone have any questions about the paraeducator revision process? All right. The other thing I want to talk to you about today, we can go to the next slide, are homeless set-aside funds. So all districts are required to reserve an adequate amount of Title I Part A funds, and that's to support students experiencing homelessness. They can be at Title I and non-Title I schools. Now, there's no specific requirements in terms of a specific amount or a percentage or anything like that they have to reserve. It just has to be adequate, but it's at the discretion of the district. And there's a variety of methodologies that districts can use. They can use a per pupil amount, they can look at historical spending, do a needs assessment, some sort of combination of those. It's up to them. And states are encouraged to work closely with districts to help ensure that adequate funds are being reserved and that we're providing technical assistance to our districts about how to use those funds. So recently, we've noticed that when the U.S. Department of Education has monitored some of the state educational agencies, we've seen an increase in feedback surrounding homeless set-aside funds. So some of their reports have cited insufficient technical assistance regarding these funds and failure to ensure that adequate amounts are being reserved. So our districts regularly ask a lot of questions about the set aside, and we also see monitoring findings regarding how funds are spent, funds not being spent in a timely fashion. So in order to provide better support and technical assistance, we are incorporating a new component in our consolidated monitoring process this year, and we're calling that the homeless set aside discussion. So let's look at the next slide. So the first part of this discussion is centered around the homeless set-aside itself. What I did was I gathered data for the past 3 years for our selected districts. We looked at the number of students identified as homeless, the total set-aside amount, and an approximate per pupil amount based on that reservation. I also looked at the methodology for determining the amount to reserve, any mention of other funding sources, community partners, and things like that that the district may work with, how the districts are using their funds. They're often used to address what I'll call welfare needs, clothing, school supplies, hygiene products, things like that. But they can actually be used in many other ways to support students. They can be used to provide tutoring, maybe mental health counseling, all kinds of things. And we also are looking at how the district ensures that funds are being spent in a timely fashion. So after the consolidated monitoring season is complete, and that should be in late April, we're going to review all of the information that's been gathered during these discussions and provide you with an update of that. So let's look at the next slide. So that's the first part of that conversation. The second part of the conversation, we are looking at one of the data points that districts may consider analyzing when they're determining how much to reserve and how to spend those funds. So we selected chronic absenteeism, which you may know has spiked since the pandemic. So the concepts that we're reviewing during this conversation could be applied to other data points, such as grades, test scores, graduation rates, behavior incidents, anything like that. But we picked chronic absenteeism, which is defined as missing 10% or more of the enrolled academic year for any reason that's excused or unexcused. So just like I gathered the data about the homeless set-asides, I looked at some historical data from our school report cards for the past 2 years, and I looked at the chronic absenteeism percentages for the district as a whole, and then for that district for just the subgroup of students experiencing homelessness. So we're interested in knowing if this or other data points were reviewed when the districts that we're monitoring were determining their homeless set-aside, if they've ever considered using funds to help address chronic absenteeism. And we understand that the answer to these questions might be no, and that's okay. This is just a discussion to help us kind of gather some information. And it's going to help us see how we can better support districts and maybe provide the districts with some better ideas of how they can use their funds. So the discussion points that we're going to look at, let's see. I already said that data points. Have you looked at this data point? How do you use funds? And then just in general, what does the district do to address chronic absenteeism? Not necessarily just for homeless students, but just in general. All right, and we'll go to the next slide. And so I would love to get some feedback from this group. Of course, I already asked you if you had any questions about the KPA revision, but if you've thought of any, feel free to shout those out now. All right, and then does anyone have any ideas in terms of some other data points that you think districts could review to help identify needs and maybe determine how to spend their homeless set-aside funds? All right, and then does anybody know of any initiatives or strategies to help address chronic absenteeism for all students that are taking place in our districts?
I wouldn't necessarily say just chronic absenteeism, but we're really trying hard to increase our student attendance. So we are looking at our most missed days and those attendances, and then we're trying to target this school year and be more preventative to see if we can increase our lowest days and turn those around, like really studying to try to figure out, is it a Friday before Martin Luther King weekend, things like that. So we're trying to kind of flip that script in general with attendance itself. So it's not necessarily targeting per se chronic, but we are trying to do some different things with attendance in general because it is a concern overall since coming out of COVID.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And then, anything related to attendance in general, that's going to help any existing chronic absenteeism. So that's awesome, right? Anyone else have anything?
I know in Davis County, we started doing, it's probably been, I don't know, at least 3 or 4 years ago, where we would have, if you miss a certain number of days, like you're going to meet with someone from our central office, or you're going to meet with a staff person from the mental health team. And we're trying to kind of be that intervention in between us filing educational neglect and the school system. And that's been super successful with us because we've been able to figure out some problems, that we can take care of at the school level. Sometimes it's been like a student is getting bullied or a student needs some kind of mental health counseling. And we're able to get some of those kiddos back in school. Or a lot of times it's as simple as, oh, I didn't know I could call in X number of times, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And then it's also helped us on the other end with the courts. Because then you can really show like every effort that you've made.
Yeah.
So it's kind of we're getting a little bit more backed by them by doing that.
Okay, that's a good idea.
I'll say in Montgomery County, we have, we really are trying to approach chronic absenteeism through the standpoint of why do our kids not feel connected to our schools and why do they not want to be there, and trying to get to the root of those things and kind of implementing programs and trainings around that. So we had a partnership with Safe and Civil Schools, and they came in and helped us really work on our tier 1 kind of chronic absenteeism plan and developing that. And so like part of that is, when a student misses, if they miss 2 days in a row, then a teacher will make a phone call home, at the high school, like the period of the day, like second period teachers will call home. So it's not like they're not getting a phone call from every single teacher.
Yeah.
But really trying to make those kids, we missed you. Why were you not here? What can we do to help you, remove barriers to get you here at school? So really getting to that root of why are they not connected and what can we do to help get them that one-to-one connection at school?
Awesome. And I know KDE's got some resources on our chronic absenteeism webpage of kind of that campaign of we missed you, we want you to be in school to help districts with this. All right, that is great information. Does anyone else have anything?
Just to add on to what was just shared, our district has also had this huge campaign this year to make sure that school is a place where kids want to attend. And so our goal is to send out 5 positive messages to parents and students about really authentic things that are happening when they are in school, so that our messaging is far more, this is a positive place to be versus we're only going to call home when things are negative. So we've had a lot of positive parental feedback around that. And even from students, they're so proud when they receive those messages. So it's hopefully that motivation to come to school is something that will help.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all great ideas.
All right. Well, thank you, Erin, and thank you all so much for these great comments and sharing of ideas of things you're working on with your districts. This is definitely a big push at KDE to address chronic absenteeism statewide. All right. Thank you very much. Let's move on to our next topic, which is the migrant summer programs. And Bobby Mays, who is a migrant program consultant, will be leading us through this discussion.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me. As Tara said, I am the newbie in this department, but I have worked in the Central Regional Service Center for the last 12 years for migrant before coming to KDE. So definitely new to KDE, but not as new to migrant. So I appreciate you all having me here. What we want to talk about today is what migrant provides in the summer. And we want to get your feedback about what you have in your districts that we might work with collaboratively to help our migrant students, and to get your feedback overall on how we as migrant staff can best help our migrant families. Okay, so first, why does our program? Why does Migrant provide summer services? Well, first, I think the standard answer, it is federally mandated that we do so. But why does the federal government want us to provide summer services? Well, first of all, it's to prevent summer slide. And as you all are all well aware, summer slide happens over the summer when students are not in school. For our migrant students, they are more vulnerable to this since they are moving a lot with their parents as their parents look for agricultural work and they're following the crops. And so they have more disruptions in their education than other students. Another reason is to ensure that students receive services that are targeted to their specific needs. Another is to keep families connected to both school and community resources. And in doing this, many times our migrant staff will actually refer students to community and school-based programs and summer opportunities that are available to them in their district or county. And then, of course, it's to identify and remove those barriers to learning. Next slide. So what we want to look at is what happened in summer programming with Migrant before COVID, and also what's happened during and after, and then going forward. We are sort of debating what's happening. So what happened in summer services prior to COVID? Instructional services for students were required with an emphasis in math and reading. Instructional services included summer camps planned by regional service centers, individual home-based tutoring, school-based tutoring, and also educational field trips. So again, prior to COVID, standalone districts and regional service centers were responsible for providing those summer services. Each regional service center provided a summer camp for their middle and high school students. They also did instruction in the home individually based on what those kids needed. And in many districts, they also had school-based camps for the younger students. So not just those middle and high schoolers in camps, but also the younger students. Prior to COVID, supplemental services, which would include like dropping things off at the house, book and educational resources, health resources, things that those families needed. Supplemental services were recommended as best practice to supplement their instruction. And the overall goal was for every student to have 25 hours of instruction. And that was in combination of both individual in-home tutoring by migrant staff and also in collaboration with the school-based programs and other community-based programs. Okay, and this is just some pictures from migrant summer camps in the past. We have kids learning to swim at a local pool. On the right-hand side, that's a local bilingual author that the migrant students were able to meet, interact with, and learn from at the public library. And each district plans programming that pertains to their specific migrant population. So those summer camps look different depending on the district and those needs. Okay. So now what happened for summer services during and after COVID? So of course, as we all are aware, due to all those COVID-19 restrictions, home-based instructional services were highly recommended, but not required for all migrant students. So during that time, KDE provided districts with resources and the flexibility to provide instruction in ways to protect the health and safety of both migrant staff and migrant families. Those supplemental services, again, book and educational resource distribution, dropping off health supplies, things like that were highly recommended. And migrant staff were required to provide a minimum of one instructional service or 2 or more supplemental services on 2 different days. In addition, though, staff were encouraged to work collaboratively with community and school partners to provide additional services. So 1 instructional service or 2 or more supplemental was the minimum, not the goal. Okay. Okay, so looking forward to summer of 2025, we at KD have been debating what that looks like, how best to serve our migrant families after the restrictions have been lifted. And this is where we also would like your feedback as well. So just overall, according to the Office of Migrant Education, or OME, what does a summer service include? What should it look like? It should address 4 things. 1, it should directly benefit a migratory child. 2, it should address a need of a migratory child in following the state education agency's Comprehensive Needs Assessment, or CNA, and our service delivery plan, SDP. Summer services should be grounded in scientifically based research. And the 4th thing, they should be designed to enable the program to meet its measurable outcomes and to contribute to the achievement of the state's performance targets. Any questions about any of that so far? Okay. So again, going forward, looking at summer 2025, we are considering what requirements we should implement for the summer. So since COVID restrictions are over, how do we best serve our migrant kids and families? We're kind of looking at 3 possible options right now. Should we, 1, provide a minimum number of instructional hours during summer? Should we provide 1 instructional service, which was similar to the pre-COVID requirements? Or should we provide 1 instructional service and or 2 supplemental services on 2 different days, which would be similar to the post-COVID requirements? And again, these are the minimums, not the goals. And so things that we would love to have your feedback about. Your thoughts on how we can best serve our migrant students going forward this summer. What kind of summer programming do you have in your district with which we could collaborate in order to help our families? Do you have any strategies or programs that have been beneficial to the migrant students in your district? So I'm going to stop there. And would anybody like to give any feedback on what you all have in your districts with which we could collaborate, or programs or strategies that have worked really well for your migrant students in your districts?
In Davis County, they do something called Camp Curiosity, and it's gone over really well for several years, and it's like a 4-week program. And they have all different kinds of like hands-on learning type things there. There's a lot of staff involved in that, and it's always like super well attended.
Okay. What age range is that camp for? Do you know?
I believe it goes through middle school. I think it's elementary through 8th.
Okay. Okay. And I know they do individual tutoring too in Daviess County. So that's great. Thank you for sharing that.
And Shelly Hammonds is the one that's over that too. And she's super awesome.
She really is. I agree with that. She really understands the families and the program, which is awesome. Anybody else? Mr. Tanner, if you're still on here, would you be interested in maybe sharing some things that you do in your district? I saw he came back in, so I don't know if he's having internet trouble. I'm not sure if he's still here or not. Anybody else? What kind of like educational programs like you think benefit the migrant kids? Do you think it's better to do face-to-face instruction? Do you think it's better to do some computer-based instruction? How do you all decide how to do that, or what programs have worked well?
I don't care to share a little bit in Montgomery County. I think the face-to-face instruction, the more hands-on we can get with our kids. One of the things that we do in our district is we have what we call our joint services program meeting. Like we bring, so like our migrant staff and our EL staff come together and they plan a night together. And we bring in like community resources for families. So like we'll have like our local library, our health department, counseling services there, just all sorts of different service providers. We have Sterling Health and they offered like dental and health needs, immunization, all of those things. And we kind of do a joint. So we try and collaborate. We bring in our preschool program, just lots of different people that are trying to serve similar populations and work together. And I think that's been very successful for us.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And as we know, our migrant families, all of our families really, but especially our migrant families, sometimes struggle with the mental health side and having resources to help them and health in general. So that's great to have mental health and the Sterling Health there to address some of that. So that's great. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all so much for sharing what has happening in your district and what you all do. The last question that I have for you all that I would love feedback on is, which summer services option do you think, the ones that we've discussed, which one do you think would work best in order to help our migrant families the most? And in doing so, we also want to allow flexibility for districts and programs to meet the needs of their migrant population. So again, the three options would be, should we provide a minimum number of instructional hours in summer, or provide one instructional service like pre-COVID requirements, or should we look at continuing the during and post-COVID requirements of providing one instructional service and or two or more supplemental services on 2 different days? Do you all have any thoughts or feedback on what you think would work best for your districts and your migrant families?
I wonder, with the minimum number, does that give the districts more flexibility as to how they meet that number? Like, is it more restrictive the other way? Or I was trying to think what would be the best one to give them the most options.
Yeah, absolutely, because we want to make sure that districts have that flexibility too. So what that really looks like, or what it's looked like in the past, is we require the migrant staff to provide some of the instruction, but additional hours can be obtained like through going to kindergarten readiness camp or Boys and Girls Club programming or something else. So it's not like we would say, okay, migrant staff, you have to do the 25 hours. They have to be involved, but they do not have to provide all of it. Does that help? Anybody else have? Yeah.
Can I ask a question about that? Because I was kind of wondering the same thing, if the instructional hours would be restrictive, and then what if they don't meet those instructional hours? But like with the instructional service, the second and the third option, are there a minimum number of hours or that they have to provide with those? Or do they just have to say we've provided? Like what's considered an instructional service, I guess? Is there amount of time or anything?
So one service, one instructional service is 1 hour. It's the way we've always counted it. And so that would just be 1 hour, 1 day. Or of course, if they do the supplemental services, which are really more like the drop-off educational resources, then that would have to occur on 2 different days. So they might go 1 day in the month of June and drop off books, and then they might go back in July and drop off some health supplies. or something like that based on the family's needs. Good questions. And it's complicated because we want to meet the needs of the migrant students, right? But we also don't want to tie districts' hands also. So we want to make it workable and best case scenario for everybody. And that's why we were wanting your feedback to see what your thoughts are.
If it's option 2 or 3, does that mean they have the whole year to meet that requirement? And then the first one, it has to be in the summer?
Actually,
is it
they're all 3 for summer only.
It's all 3 summer.
Yes. Yes.
I think I like option 3 the best for me, at least if I'm looking at this. I think it provides the most flexibility.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, thank you all so much for your feedback. We appreciate it. I've taken notes and we will talk about this further based on what you all have said and discussed. And if you think of something after we're off here or you have further questions, please reach out to Christina Benassi, our Migrant State Director, or me. Next slide, I think, has our contact information on it. Yeah. So you can reach us by email or by phone there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Bobby. Appreciate it. And thank you all for participating in that discussion. Really appreciate your feedback. All right, let's move on to our next topic. We have transportation to and from the School of Origin, and Sharma Aiken is joining us this morning to share information on this topic.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on this very cold Wednesday morning. I'm Sharma Aiken, Title I Program Consultant, Foster Care State Education Agency, point of contact. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about providing transportation to and from the School of Origin for our students in foster care. And before I dive into this presentation, I think it's important to start with some background information to help us focus and remind us that everything that we do is for the students. So children enter foster care because they have experienced abuse, neglect, or dependency, and many have been separated from their families and all that is familiar to them. So the Every Student Succeeds Act establishes educational stability provisions. A consistent school environment can help counteract some of the negative effects of foster care. So interagency collaboration is key to ensuring educational stability needed to improve these outcomes. And I think it's important to review the terms associated with foster care. It's important for us to understand and know what they mean so that we know how to best support the students. Next slide for me, Leslie. So School of Origin, what is School of Origin? It is defined as the school in which a child is enrolled when they enter foster care. If a child's placement changes, the School of Origin would then be considered the school in which they were enrolled at the time of the placement change. The Every Student Succeeds Act requirements for students in foster care emphasizes, it has strong emphasis on collaboratively making sure that we're focusing on the students' educational needs. Next slide, please. Education best interest determination, sometimes referred to as the best interest determination meeting, best interest process, or bid. When does it come into play and how are best interest decisions made? So best interest determinations are required both at the initial entry into foster care or when any subsequent school moves are being contemplated because of a change in living placements. ESSA puts emphasis on collaboration during this meeting. The meeting participants include, of course, the DCBS worker. This is a required participant, as well as the district's foster care point of contact. Teachers can be invited. Just keep in mind that it's kind of hard to schedule around all teacher schedules, but we would love to have at least one teacher attend, and those that can't usually send in information if they have questions, if a child is sleeping in class every day, if they come to school hungry. Sometimes students disclose information about their foster homes. Foster parents are in attendance, any other colleagues, guardian ad litem, CASA, advocate, etc. This best interest determination meeting should be student-centered and context-specific. The meeting participants should presume that remaining in the school of origin is in the student's best interest unless the bid meeting suggests that attending another school in any public school that the student has attended previously is in the student's best interest. If a child in foster care has never been enrolled in school before, they do not have a school of origin and should be immediately enrolled in the new school. And I'm going to share with you a link, but the updated non-regulatory guidance, which is on a couple of slides I'll share with you, it encourages that the best interest determination meeting actually be completed within 3 business days. And so as a result of that meeting, some students will need transportation to remain in their school of origin when it's in their best interest. Next slide. So when a best interest determination meeting indicates that a student should attend their school of origin, the transportation provisions are triggered. The Title I educational stability provisions requires that districts who receive Title I funds collaborate with the child welfare agency to implement clear written procedures governing how transportation to maintain students in their school of origin will be provided, arranged, and funded for the duration of the child's time in foster care. And we are 9 years into the implementation of the ESSA requirement. So every district should have a transportation plan in place so that school of origin transportation can be provided to and from the school of origin. And of course, school of origin, again, is transportation to and from the school in which the child is enrolled at the time the child enters foster care or any placement changes. Next slide, please. So coordinating and funding transportation. Who's responsible for coordinating and funding transportation for students in foster care to the school of origin? So under the Every Student Succeeds Act, collaboratively, the local school district, the child welfare agencies are responsible for coordinating and promptly ensuring that students in foster care receive transportation to their school of origin when needed. There's no limit on time, distance travel to the school of origin. Caseworkers and best interest determination participants determine whether staying in a school of origin is appropriate for the child. And this is on a case-by-case basis. So every decision should be unique to the student's situation. Therefore, there are no hard limits on time and distance travel. So for example, you have a 6-year-old traveling on the school bus for an hour each way to and from school may not be appropriate. But if you have a high school student who has an hour ride and is trying to finish that last semester of school to graduate, that will be something that's more appropriate. Next slide, please. So clear written transportation procedures, like I mentioned before, as part of the transportation agreement, transportation plans must address how transportation will be provided, specifics about how transportation will be arranged and how the details will be communicated. And of course, the district and the child welfare agency will work out the funding aspect, like who will pay, how the school will be, how the district will be reimbursed, etc. So what is KDE's role in reviewing foster care transportation agreement procedures? So since 2020, KDE has monitored the implementation of the Title I Part A educational stability provisions for students in foster care as part of our consolidated approach to programmatic monitoring. We've developed a written guidance document, provided training to strengthen how districts create, maintain, and implement their transportation procedures. This guidance is also posted on the Foster Care Federal Programs website. KDE reviews the transportation procedures. We provide very detailed feedback to make sure that our districts have addressed all the required topics. It's vital to have those procedures in place to implement them effectively. So this can help to minimize education disruption by making sure students are able to participate fully in school. So we work with DCBS and giving them regular updates regarding how many transportation agreements have come across our office. We ask for input on how we can improve the work that we're doing. Roughly about 20 districts are selected for review annually. Next slide, please. So last year, late November, the U.S. Department of Education, in collaboration with the Department of Health and Human Services, they released a new non-regulatory guidance. It's called Ensuring Educational Stability and Success for Students in Foster Care. This joint guidance provides critical information about how federal laws support students in foster care, including details about ESSA and the Fostering Connections Act. Of key significance regarding providing transportation to the school of origin, the guidance addresses that ESSA specifically says that the cost of transportation cannot be a best interest determination factor. The new guidance builds on this by stating that administrative burden for education agencies or child welfare agencies should not be considered when completing the best interest determination process. Additionally, the transportation should include transportation for needed academic supports, including tutoring, summer school, and enrichment programs. And then finally, the new guidance encourages school districts to adopt policies that allow students who exit foster care to remain in their school of origin with appropriate transportation for at least the remainder of the school year. Of course, at the very bottom of this slide, this is the hyperlink to the non-regulatory guidance. That link was also sent out in the commissioner's newsletter. Also sent out that communication to all of the district's foster care points of contact. Next slide, please. So we've got some questions for feedback and discussion. What process is in place in your district to ensure timely notification of placement changes for students in foster care? So meaning, what type of processes do you all have set up with the child welfare agency to ensure they know who to contact and how that information is communicated in a timely effort? How has the implementation of the transportation procedures gone in your district? Is there anything that KDE can do to better support the districts in implementing this requirement? And the last one is, what barriers do you have with addressing situations where a foster student's placement is outside of the regular school bus route, requiring additional transportation costs? So if you would like to speak up and answer any of these questions, feel free to unmic yourself if you're willing to answer any of these questions, or feel free to ask any other questions that's on your mind. If you think of anything later, next slide, please. You or your foster care point of contact or Title I program person in your district can always feel free to email me or contact me if you have any questions concerning the educational stability provisions for students in foster care. Thank you. That's all that I have for you all today.
Thank you, Sharma. All right, our next presenter is Shara Savage. She is an Education Administrator Program Manager here at KDE, and she will be providing us some information on the KDE Model Framework 2.0 overview. Welcome, Shara.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. As she said, I am in the Office of Assessment and Accountability, and I'm going to share with you some things that we are working on for the future of education. So today I'm going to provide you an update on the framework of the Kentucky's Future of Assessment and Accountability. We're working to have a balanced accountability system that will include components to reflect local properties and areas of choice, and components that are the same for all schools. So remember that the Moonshot that was worked on by the Kentucky Council of United We Learn. The moonshot of this work is to create an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all learners. The best way to do that is through local districts working in their communities to determine what matters most to the people that they serve. This Kentucky United We Learn Council has led this work, and that council is made up of 55 members and is led by a parent. Penny Christensen is our chair, and then we have Jim Flynn, who is our vice chair, and then we have the KDE lead, Karen Dodd. So today I'm going to share with you what that local accountability means and what it is beginning to look like across Kentucky. Next slide, please. So here is a look at where we've been and where we are headed. So you see there in 25, right now we are hosting town halls to deepen community engagement and discuss the next steps, potential leading to a model framework 3.0. And in 26, our goal is to deliver recommendations to the General Assembly. Next slide, please. So there is three big ideas around this work. It's vibrant learning, and then accelerating innovation, and that would be in accountability, and collaboration with those local communities. And next slide, please. Let's start thinking about assessment and accountability as two different distinct systems. While assessments do contribute to accountability, they serve a broader purpose beyond compliance. Our goal is to transform these systems from a focus solely on standard assessments and accountability measures to a more holistic approach centered on students and vibrant learning experiences. Next slide, please. So what is vibrant learning? Next slide. These common characteristics that you see surfacing are real-life examples of how we define vibrant learning experiences. It also it also embodies the things that you identify for your child that you care about, or what that child cares about. Next slide, please. While Kentucky's districts are transforming the student experience through vibrant learning experiences, they are also preparing students to be successful in life after K through 12. The Kentucky Board of Education has adopted the Kentucky Portrait of a Learner, a collection of knowledge and skills that students should know and exhibit upon graduation. Portraits of a Learner recognize and honors not just academic knowledge, but also personal traits and skills that the students develop in their K through 12 career. Next slide, please. So we have had currently we have 140 out of the 171 Kentucky districts are developing or have developed a portrait of a learner. Many districts are creating performance assessment systems to measure the agreed upon competency base through authentic experiences and of learning. Next slide, please. So let's start by defining what local accountability means and why it matters to communities. Next slide. Much like the Portrait of a Learner defines success for individual students, a local accountability system defines success for a total system like a school district. It is based upon the partnership between the school district and the community. All stakeholders provide input on the valued components that will be regularly reported to the public. Next slide, please. So let's take a deeper look at that Model Framework 2.0 overview. So we are shifting away from those traditional practices to approach that better serves our students and communities. Historically, our systems have focused on standardization, comparison, state control, and compliance. Methods designed to ensure uniformity, meet regulatory requirements. While these priorities brought consistency, they often limited innovation and collaboration. Now we're at a pivotal moment of transformation. Going forward, we hope that systems will prioritize vibrant learning, collaboration, local innovation, and feedback and support. These changes aim to empower students, foster partnerships, and create accountability structures that reflect unique values in those local communities. Next slide, please. So the goal is to implement a balanced accountability systems that not only align with federal requirements, but prioritize the local needs and provides flexibility for districts. So the three main components will be your statewide measures, your local measures, and then we have measures of choice. So, your statewide measures would be those reading and math, the English language progress, post-secondary readiness, and graduation rate. Science is one piece in there that students, while students must be tested in science using a statewide measure, districts have the flexibility to incorporate additional competency-based measures into their local accountability system. And so their local measures would be things like the portrait of a learner, engagement, those vibrant experiences. So some of the choices that the local districts would have would be around creating their social studies and the writing, again, those vibrant learnings experiences, and those interim assessments. So we would have a smaller summative assessment, and districts could opt in to standard-based interim assessments that would provide feedback to the teachers in schools. And so on this slide, there's a QR code for more in-depth details around the work that we're doing. So next slide. And so we're working towards this, and it'll be a phased-in approach to have this completely in place. But we are excited about the work and carefully planning to ensure that the districts have the tools and the time and the support that they would need with this new system that we are setting forth to bring about. So next slide. So how are we getting this feedback? So right now we are in the stage, we are having town halls. And so on the next slide here, you'll see the schedule. Now the one for the schedule today, we have had to cancel that due to the weather and the snow, but we will be rescheduling that. So here is where we are collecting feedback from stakeholders. So I have kind of went through a framework 2.0, but out of these town halls, we will is emerging a framework 3.0. So still lots of good feedback being collected, and more changing of that model that will happen, but that is the direction that we are moving towards at this point, heading towards that moonshot. So at this time, I'll stop, and I know we're right at time. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I'd be glad to answer some questions today.
Yeah, actually, we have another 30 minutes, so you're fine on time.
Okay, great. I thought we wrapped up at 10. So any questions?
Will there be any proficiency set goals for reading and math particularly?
For reading and math, those are federally required. So those proficiency marks are already in place at this time. So that's part of that federal piece.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I know I threw a lot at you all pretty quick. So any thoughts or do you have any feedback that I can take back? Okay. Well, if you think of any that you can always reach out to us. Our email is dacinfo@education.ky.gov. We'd be glad to take any feedback that way or questions that you may have. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Sheriff, for being here. Really appreciate that. Thank you for all this information. All right, can we go to the next slide and then the one after that? Okay, so our last agenda item for today is to discuss if you all have any requests for future agenda topics. You can see our last meeting of the school year is going to be on April 22nd. And if you all, and so just briefly, I'll talk about, this is obviously the Title I Committee of Practitioners. And so our topics are going to revolve around Title I, Parts A, B, C, and D. And so accountability system, of course, is in there with Title I, Part A. So if you have any topics related to any of those Title I programs, let me know. And if we can possibly get those on the agenda, we certainly will. But would love to hear any feedback. We've got plenty of time to talk about anything that you're interested in hearing more about.
I had one. I was trying to see if it fits. We've had a lot of interest in preschool and behaviors in preschool. And it's like we have to go way out of Kentucky to try to find like evidence-based or trainers to talk about almost like trauma-informed practices regarding behaviors, but it's for the littles. And I don't know if that fits in the Title I. That was just something I thought I would throw out there. And then another one, I think we've talked about maybe one other time, like innovative strategies or something for increasing like parent involvement in schools is always one that I think we're very interested in to try to get the parents more involved.
Thank you. Those are excellent suggestions, and we can definitely work with those. Yes. Any other requests? And now, if we get a whole bunch, we may not be able to do them all at the next meeting, but we'll definitely keep them on the list to work in as we can. Any other suggestions? All right. Well, we will definitely appreciate those great suggestions, and we will we'll start working on those so we can try to get you some presentations on that in April. All right. Well, I want to thank you all again for being here and for your attention. And I hope that you found some interesting and perhaps new information. Know that we greatly appreciate and value your collaboration and your feedback. And thank you so much again for being here. Have a great rest of your day.